Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing people from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green and sustainable future for us, the planet and all beings. I'm your host, Tom Simak, a fellow plant eater who strives to optimize every living ecosystem, passionate about helping this beautiful floating rock we call home achieve longevity along with all the lovely creatures that dwell among it. I'm really excited about the episode today, and for the visually inclined, just a reminder that we are on the YouTubes. I'll leave the link to see that in the show notes, and keep the conversation going on Instagram at plant.paradigm and TikTok. All the people seems to be on TikTok these days as well, so we're definitely on there. But today's episode is with Bernice Cunningham. Bernice is the director of the Planting Change Foundation, a lawyer in Nicaragua, and studied environmental sustainable management at UC Berkeley. He's also a climate change policy advisor in the UN framework on climate change and a member of international networks such as the Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide and Climate Action Network Latin America. Bernice collaborates with various international NGOs, government delegations, students, teachers, and frontline communities from different parts of the world to develop national and international projects of environmental conservation and human sustainable development, especially on organic agriculture, water management, climate change, and education. In this conversation, we'll be talking a lot about the work he does for the environment, the state of Nicaragua, implementing change, and changing governmental policies. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Bernice is a beautiful soul, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Bernice, welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast. How are you going today?
I'm going very well. It's a Sunday, so everything is going smooth today.
Very smooth, very kicking back. It is, I was just looking outside through like the window I've got, and it's like it's super windy today here in Melbourne. But then I'm like, but like we were talking about before, it's like, is it like mega windy in Nicaragua at the moment because of the season?
No, it is very hot at the moment, but like 2 weeks ago, it was very windy when we had the first hurricane, the biggest hurricane that came. It was very windy and it got cold, but now it's hot again. So I guess with the new hurricane coming in 2 days, 3 days, it will be windy again and cold.
That's insane. And you guys, being in the center of Nicaragua, do you experience a bit of flooding, or is that mainly like the northern regions?
It's mainly in the northern regions. Here, there's not much flooding.
I'm glad they stick to one part of Nicaragua, at least so it's not the whole country.
It's not the whole country.
No, but what's been happening in your world lately with work and with all the things that are going on?
In my country, it's very complex to work in the environmental field because it seems as a political issue. So we have to be very smooth and very quiet in what we do and very careful to not touch any political things. But right now we are working especially in water infrastructure, building water infrastructure for rural communities. So we are thinking like these communities are poor, very poor, extremely poor, but they have so many resources. So they're not poor because they have a lack of resources. We think they poor because of the mentality of the people. And so we're working on that. And our projects in the past was just come and build infrastructure, but now we will take some time to build human capacity and then build the infrastructure for the people. So we are in the middle of that project right now.
What kind of mentality are you referring to when you're saying these people are poor in their mentality? What does that mean?
Well, it means that they have, for example, they could be selling resources that they could reuse. Like I don't know how to say this word in English, but in Spanish is when you use fertilizer, organic fertilizer. They could be selling organic fertilizer, and they could be selling so many different things, and they're not. And we think that that's one of the problems of being poor is not the lack of resources, it's the mindset that like if you born in a poor family, you will have this from generation to generation, and that's what we're trying to fight now. Because if you don't end poverty, climate change will continue.
Yeah, well, I guess,
Yeah,
I'm not sure how true this is, but do they know like how to even sell, fertilizer? Like, is that part of like the educational process that isn't being hit very well in like the rural regions of how to market a product and how to price things and then how to like sell it out to the public? Is that maybe part of the issue?
yeah, that's very part of the issue. What happened with these farmers, because they're farmers, they produce bananas, for example,
Hmm.
and they don't have a truck to take out the bananas, so they sell the products so cheap, and people take advantage of them. The intermediaries, they take advantage of them, and so even if they produce food, they don't sell it at a good price, and that's why their families are poor. They don't have water, and they don't have electricity at the moment. So that's the two things that we're trying to change.
Yeah.
But definitely, selling is one of the things.
Well, when we're talking about, people taking advantage, like how, out of curiosity, when they're trying to sell this, banana and they can't do it properly, how cheap are they selling this thing? Like, are we talking like 1 cent a kilo? Like, what kind of price tag are they ripping themselves off on?
Yeah, they're like ridiculous prices. I don't know, like the exchange of dollar right now. Like the exchange of a dollar here is 35 Cordobas each dollar, and they
Hmm.
selling that planting for 5 Cordobas, like
Wow, that's like 20
20.
cents. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
insane. Like
so,
considering, here in Australia, it's not uncommon for bananas to be like $3 a kilo that are like grown in Australia. So that's like, what is that? Like, I don't know my math, but like 30 times cheaper than what it is here. So that's definitely would be
yeah.
an economic impact on them. And I mean, I was reading something really interesting and I want to get started actually with the post that you had written on UC Berkeley's website talking about the Paris Agreement and heading right into rural regions and the whole climate change topic. I actually didn't know before reading that article that Nicaragua wasn't in the Paris Agreement. So why was that?
Okay, Nicaragua, and it was one of the only countries that say that the Paris Agreement wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough
Hmm.
to. So that's why we didn't sign it. Our government didn't sign it at the before, because they say it was a joke. You know that the NDC were voluntaries. That was a joke, and it was not strong enough to get to the 1.5 target. And if you've seen what's happening now, it seems like they were right. You
Hmm.
know, we are not heading into 1.5 decrease on the temperature. So that's one of the main reasons.
Well, it's so fascinating because I think one of the other countries that didn't sign on is Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know what reason, they had, but then when you look at Nicaragua as like a government, you think you didn't sign on to the Paris Agreement, like you guys are stupid. But then they're like, no, this is just isn't good enough. That just seems kind of like a drop the mic, like you guys suck, like we can do better than this. And it's kind of a statement and a global statement saying that as awesome as an initiative the Paris Agreement is, it's just not fair enough to reverse all the damage and destruction we've done to this planet. So I actually think it was really cool. And then, especially considering the position that Nicaragua is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think half of the energy of Nicaragua is from renewable sources.
Yeah, we are one of the countries in Central America that has developed the most renewable sources. In 2002, we had energy deficits, and we were producing most of our energy by gasoline and oil, and the oil prices just go up, and
Mm.
we have like not enough money to produce energy. So we have energy for 4 hours per day. So one of the reasons that we developed renewable energy, it was for necessity. It was not just climate change. It was like we
Mm,
need something different than oil. So we made a law, and this is one of the most successful law that say that every investment in renewable energy will not pay taxes for 10 years. So
wow.
with this law, like if you import utilities to build renewable energy, you don't pay taxes for 10 years and you don't pay any taxes. So that made millions of dollars in investment in solar and wind power. And right now we are almost 50% of renewable energy in the country, and we have a super habit of energy.
That's awesome. I definitely see, as soon as you said that, something that a lot of Western countries are doing wrong with, which is, hey, if you invest in coal, mine, and gas, you can avoid tax in all their different ways. But you guys have gone the complete opposite route of investing in renewables, and you can be tax free, well, essentially tax free. I'm not sure how the system works. Like, do you think that sort of mentality or tax implications can be implemented anywhere in the world to get that similar result?
Definitely, definitely. And you see it with the fossil fuel industry that have subsidies for billions of dollars, and they have subsidies. So we have been subsidizing the fossil fuel industry for years. And now that you tell to a conservative that we will subsidize renewable energy immediately, they say you're a communist. You
Mm,
know, and like,
yeah, right.
so I think that approach is very interesting. The Nicaragua approach that like you cut taxes for renewable energy, that will increase investment definitely, and it will increase the market value and the market opportunities when you don't pay taxes for this energy.
That's so insane. And it kind of feels a bit alien, but it also feels really simple. Like that's the way that it just should be. And something really interesting in the article that I actually wanted to bring up is you wrote the this word always stumps me. The bureaucracy system in the United Nations framework on climate change is very complex. The process to access it is to finance a project that is very complicated. Just a few countries have the capacity to allow this type of climate change finance. What sort of financial implications are there to actually sign on to the Paris Agreement? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm referring that the Green Climate Fund is like you need like 10 years to get a project approved, or 5 years. It's like insane. And other thing that is happening with all this bureaucracy, United Nations is a big bureaucracy. It's like a
Mm,
government, a big world government, and it's not effective. It's not delivering. It's just talks. And I think we need more action and less talk. We talk too much, and in
mm.
this United Nation, and we talk about the same things every year. Like, I think it's not time to talk anymore. It's time to implement all the things that we've been talking for 25 years. We're going to 26 COP in Glasgow. That basically is 27 because we missed 2020.
Mhm.
So it's 27 years talking about the solutions of this problem. And I think that everybody knows which the solutions are. They're very simple solutions. You invest in clean energy, because this is another thing that I want to bring up. There's a lot of greenwashing in the climate change industry
Yes.
when you talk about renewable energy. I don't like that term renewable energy, because in the concept of renewable energy in Nicaragua, for example, you call the energy that is produced with the baggage of the sugarcane renewable energy. But to
Biofuel.
produce,
Yeah.
yeah, biofuel. But to produce that biofuel, you land grab, make the communities more poor, you use water, you use a lot of chemics. So that's not renewable. You are destroying the land, you are deforestation, you're making the communities poor, and then you get in the bagage of that sugarcane to make biofuel, and you call it renewable. So I think there's a lot of greenwash in that term, renewable energy. I will say we'll have to go to a term of clean energy. Big hydroelectric are another example of human rights violations in Central America. And most of these funds comes from the United Nations. So they're using funds of the United Nations and projects that has a lot of implications in human rights, indigenous people. So we have to be very careful that the medicine is not worse than the disease.
Mm, yeah, that's very important. I mean, I'm curious to know what kind of issues, you're tackling in Central America in terms of, you mentioned hydro and one other thing. What's happening that isn't good in that sector that could maybe be better?
Okay, hydro has big implications because destroy biodiversity is usually in indigenous land, like all the land that is conserved in Central America is owned by the indigenous people.
Hmm.
So you get these big hydroelectrics, for example, in Honduras, and the people was against there, and there was a big leader called Marta Cáceres, and she was shot. She was shot to death for defending the right of the population to not have hydro, because for people. Um, they come and they talk about development, but the
Hmm.
development is for them. It's not for the people. So they build these big hydro plants. They kick out the people. The people lose the water, the resources, the natural environment, and they define that as development, but it's just development for the private sector. It's not development for the people. And
Hmm.
if in Central America we don't invest on the people, if we don't tackle poverty, climate change will just not be feasible.
Mm. Well, it kind of reminds me of, I'm not sure if you've watched it. There's this documentary on Netflix, and I think it's extremely powerful, and it's kind of awoken this whole new perspective of how developers can really run the lives of a lot of these rural communities that don't have the power or any resources. And it's called Two Worlds Collide. I believe that was the name. I think it was based in Costa Rica, and it was actually on power plants and talking about taking. I think it was power plants. Man, I've totally blanked. I'll leave the name of the documentary in the show notes. But essentially, they've taken these people's land and they ended up shooting. I think they killed like 13 people, and essentially the indigenous fought back and took a few police custody and the military, and there was this huge um, kind of civil war happening. Do you remember, or do you know what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, yeah, and I could tell you this. You're talking about one example, but there in the Latin America region is one of the most dangerous places to be an environmental leader, an environmental defender. In
Really?
Colombia, they kill defenders every day. In Brazil, they kill defenders every day. In Mexico, they kill them every day. So this is a war against environmental defenders, because you have to remind that when you talk about natural resources, you're talking about millions of dollars. You're talking about land. You're talking about wood. You're talking about gold. You're talking about water. So this, at the end of the day, is an economic discussion about a lot of millions of dollars. So they shoot people for this every day in Latin
Mm.
America, and like in places like Australia or the US, you don't hear much about this, but you have to realize that the fight and the struggle that we're going on is life and death.
Mm. How can something like this be avoided? Like, obviously, I'm not in the world, so I haven't pondered much on the sort of solutions. Is there a way to do climate activism safe, or is it literally to take the power away of the developers and try to do it in a more ethical way? Like, what sort of solutions or thought-provoking questions have you come across in how we can deal with this?
I will say for the developed world is to buy products that come from local communities, to buy products that are not made by companies that are violating human rights in the countries that they produce the product. And I will say that economics is a fast change. If economics change, things change fast. It's like the example of the renewable energy that I was talking about in Nicaragua. It was just this law, like we have so many environmental laws in Nicaragua. They're like big. They have like 200 articles. But this law of renewable energy have like 10 articles, and it make a change of that will last for generations and generations. So I think if we think economics will help us. Like stop buying products that violate human rights, stop buying products that have a huge environmental impact. And if the consumer leads the market. So if we can convince consumers to use more climate friendly products, I think that will be a big change.
As a consumer, can we affect the, I guess, the horrific events of people getting like slaughtered in all these different countries in Latin America? Or is that, when we choose to buy local or buy sustainable or buy whatever it is that indirectly or directly affecting that whole, I guess, system of slaughter?
Definitely. Like if you decide to buy products from the community that I am work on, and you will be helping poor people to develop, to get wealth, to get money to their family. But if you buying, for example, from a big company like Nestle, you will, uh, when you buy, it's a political statement.
Yeah.
When you purchase something, it's a political statement. So I think we as a consumer has an enormous power that sometimes we don't realize how enormous power we have as a consumer. But we need to act like in blocks, in big blocks of consumers. Like you see in the US right now, Pizza Hut is offering vegan pizza. Why Pizza Hut is offering vegan pizza? Because a big shift of the consumers are asking for this. So that's why that they shifting to offering this product. So I think that's another example of the power of consumers.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure for most people, especially listening, if you're mostly plant-based or vegan, however you want to label it, you kind of understand that when you go and buy that, animal, you're kind of voting for that to happen more of. So I guess it's not, you're taking it one step further and making it a political statement. It's like, okay, if you invest in mining companies or whatever it is, like with America's like the 401k, Roth IRA, here it's like the super, and I'm sure there's lots of pension plans. It's like, that's your political statement where you're putting your money. And I think that's very important. And I actually wanted to ask, with the Paris Agreement in Nicaragua, is there any point in Nicaragua actually signing on to be part of that agreement?
Yeah, we signed the Paris Agreement. We didn't sign it in 2015, but we signed it in 2017
Okay.
in Bonn. We signed the Paris Agreement. Our government say, all right, is Paris Agreement is not enough. We maintain that position, but it's the only thing we have. Paris Agreement is the only thing we have. So in that logical, we signed the Paris Agreement in 2017 in the conference in Bonn, Germany.
Yeah. And then that hasn't really changed anyone's or the nation's stance on the Paris Agreement. You've just kept doing your own thing, and then that's just on the side to just say, hey, we're part of it. We're doing our bit.
Yeah, and this will go to most of the countries that I analyzed the NDCs. The Paris Agreement, the UNFCCC, is a universe that is different from the real world, the real life and local communities. So I always a criticism that I come from this event is that we are trying to write solutions from a diplomatic establishment, but these solutions are not probably the solutions that the people need. And I will give you an example. So we have a global pandemic. You know that. Everybody know it.
I've heard of it.
And yeah, you heard of it.
Yeah.
So we had it here. And one of the things that the pandemic hurt us is that we can't go to the people to validate our project. So in this community that I'm working, we make a project, a beautiful project to produce food, to produce organic food. And we developed this project in our office and with our bureaucracy team. And, we think we're the smart people that know what the people need because we study the environment and everything. But when we went after the pandemic to say, hey, we got this project for you guys and to produce food, the people say, we don't have water. So if they don't have water, they can't produce food. And that's one example of solutions that you think in a UNFCCC conference, but when you bring it to the local level, you realize that has nothing to do with the local
Mm.
level. So the community tells us what we need is water. That's what we need. When we've got water, probably we'll could be producing food. But if we don't have water to drink, how you could come and tell me that you're going to invest in agriculture? So this is a small example, but it's in a large scale what's going on in the UNFCCC process solutions that we are making solutions in offices and consulting offices. And the solutions will never come from the consulting offices. The solutions, the only one that know the solution of a local issue is the local people. And the climate change problems are local problems.
Well, that's a lot of the time. It's the same with Nepal. I had a chat with Pramisha Thapalaya, and she deals a lot of stuff in Nepal, and it's all the rural regions that are suffering from the flooding, and their agriculture is getting destroyed, and they don't have enough water to even feed their family, let alone sell to make money. So, that's really, it's kind of like this whole paradoxical thought that, people in suits know what people in these local villages need. And I guess it's
Yeah.
it's it's sad because, sometimes like people like yourself really want to help. Like you really want to be in that position to help, but you just, we're missing the perspective a little bit. But it's awesome to be able to then go, like, have you adapted any of the projects to then be like, okay, they need water, let's create a policy for water? Has that ever happened?
Yes, it happens in this project. Like we were very frustrated because it took some months of planification to build this project. And when we take it to the community, is 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 a project that is not feasible. It will not work. It will just be a loss of resources. So what we do now is like think global but act local. It's one of the slogans that we have.
Mm.
And never build a project without asking the people what they want, what they need, because they are the only ones that know what their problems are. We don't know. Like people in the United Nations, they have no clue. They're bureaucracies. They people with suits. They in another universe. They're in another universe,
Mm.
and in that dynamics, we have wasted 27 years and billions of dollars in projects that have failed because they don't take account on the local people. And I will let you know why. It's because all the money goes to the government, and governments, they only do this NDC as an agenda obligation. They don't do it as a realistic plan. They just do it because they signed the Paris Agreement. And sometimes the people that make these plans, the government change and new people come, so they don't have no clue what's going on.
That's just kind of sad, I guess. I mean, what would the alternative be when you've got all this money that's generated? Like, are you saying, so right now it's going all to this government and they're kind of just doing it because if I don't do it, people will be mad, basically? Are you saying that there's a potential of a system where it goes to, say, a separate organization, a non-for-profit, which then is directly linked to local communities as like almost, you could make it a subsector of the government or like a completely separate branch that maybe works together? Is that a potential solution, or how is a good way to tackle that issue?
I will give you an example. The adaptation plan of Nicaragua cost $5 million to make an adaptation plan. And I think that we should be using this money to invest in local projects and give projects direct. to the people. Give the finance direct to the communities, direct to the local leaders, direct to the NGOs, and not just monopolize the money with the government. If you monopolize the money, and governments are not efficient. It's just they're
Mm.
not. Maybe in Australia they are, but in Latin
No.
America, well, in Latin America they're not efficient. They're just bureaucracies that they have no idea what they're doing, and I think they just trying to feel an obligation of the Paris Agreement. They're not really trying to tackle climate change. They're just trying to look good in the UNFCCC meetings.
Mm. Well, I guess I'm gonna play the devil's advocate for a second. I think with the government, and I could be completely wrong here, but when a change needs to happen at a governmental level, I feel like it has to jump through so many loops. Like you have to get this petition signed, and then this half of the House of Parliament needs to sign. This side can't disagree. Otherwise, it goes to another 3 months of discussing and debate. Whereas if it's like at an organizational level, or even when we're talking councils and municipalities, it can, oh, we need more trees here, or we need more water here. Done. Like give me a week, let me deliver it. And I feel like that's the issue. And I feel like some governments genuinely want to make a change, and some politicians genuinely want to make a change, but the hoops that they have to jump through are absolutely stupid.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Well, being, in climate change, and I guess in the world of law for yourself, is there a way that we can change the system or implement a new system to benefit the environment anyway? Have you had any thoughts as to what we can bring in either as a global world, or like specifically as with the nation of Nicaragua?
Yes, definitely will be the non-state solution. The non-state solution means that the solution should come from the people, not from the states.
Mhm.
And if
What does that look
you
like?
look like NGOs, look like a community organizer, looks like private sector, because like I will tell you this, if we change the private sector, we change the problem. Like governments are like intermediaries of this problem. They say yes, they say no, but who really has the power is the private sector. So one of the things that I'm trying to fight right now is like NGOs and private sector, we hate each other. We always complaining about the private sector. We always denouncing the private sector, but somehow we need to find a way to convince the private sector that in their own interest to maintain their business is to protect the natural resource that their business depend on. So I think we need to build more bridges and not to destroy, and not wait for governmental solutions, because as you say, the hurricane will pass and destroy the houses, and 3 years later they will get to a decision when the houses are
Mm.
already, people are already dead, and there's no point of the solution. So time is one of the biggest point elements that is in risk right now. Time. So we need to rethink. And I always think in a quote of Albert Einstein that say, "Don't look." In Spanish, I remember in Spanish. So I'm trying to translate it in English.
You can just say
Like
it in
craziness
Spanish.
is, yeah, I would say, las soluciones, no esperes soluciones distintas haciendo siempre lo mismo. Don't wait for different solutions, doing always the same.
Mm. I think the one you're
Like,
looking, I think it's, I think translated in English was like doing the same thing 100 times and expecting a different result is craziness. Something like that, right?
exactly, is
Yeah.
that one. Is that one. Because we always thinking that especially this will go to the governments and everybody. Like, if a solution already failed, why you would try it again?
Mm.
Why? So I think we are in a world of different solutions, and like we have to think outside of the box. We have to think like rethink everything that failed and everything that worked and concentrate on the things that work
Mm.
will be a good start.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a few projects that you've been doing in the past. What are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, and probably for the next 20 years, I
For
will
the
be
next 20
working.
years. Gosh.
Yes, I will be working in water issues. Water will be one of the biggest problems in climate change projections. Water is a human right. Water is one of the biggest problems in Latin America. And the development, the sustainable development of our country depends on water. So right now we're building infrastructure. We're working with young people to involve in water governance. We're working in the schools very hard, very hard. We know that the education is a long-term solution, but sometime you have to start. So we start a few years ago. Right now we're working with 2,800 students. And what we're doing in the primary schools, elementary schools, I think is the word in English,
Mm-hmm.
is that we are installing monitoring systems. Like right now, we have a climate change monitoring system. So we measure rain, we measure temperature, and we give them the students scientific tools, like tools that you will measure something with a scientific data. So in one of the schools, students are making predictions, are making the how many rain went in a day and compared it with historic rain, and all this information is used to know if you could produce rice or you should produce bananas, and how the weather has implication. And it's in the mathematical class. So now it's part of the curriculum of this school. And we think it's one of our biggest success in education.
Mm.
And now we're going to install a water measure. We're going to give them some tools to the students so they could measure water. And finally, they measure solid waste. They go, they clean the lake, and then they do a scientific methodology to take percentage of solid waste that are contaminated with plastic or this is carton. So we're making the schools into research centers, elementary schools
Mm.
into research centers, because we deeply believe in education, and we think that a change that will be maintained and that will be secure is to change the kids, change the educational system.
Well, was it hard to kind of implement, or I guess almost in a way pitch your idea to, I'm not sure who runs the school. Would it be like a principal that you went to, or how did you kind of go into this and be like, I want to teach these kids about that? Like, how was that received?
It was received amazing. Like
Awesome.
if we have more money, we'll have 20,000 students now. The problem is not the willingness of the schools. The problem that we just have 2,800 students and we don't have 1.5 million students is money right
Mm.
now. But the schools that we are working are really into this, are really working like the directors are working with us. The teachers are motivated. The students are motivated. So I think the schools are a good opportunity to change the world. And in Nicaragua, it was very easy to do it.
That's really awesome and really good to hear, because I'd imagine in some places of the world you might, or some people might come across a bit of resistance, especially with the teachers and stuff. And I was kind of leaning towards my next question, which is well, it looks like climate change is kind of well known and well discussed. Is it like part of vocabulary? Like, is there conversations happening all the time about how we can tackle this?
I think Greta Thunberg made climate change popular.
Mm.
And I think her influence goes beyond Europe. And in Latin America, her movement has become very strong in the elementary students. So now it's more as a popular subject. But before Greta, it was not that popular as now
Wow.
in the student community. Yeah.
That's awesome. I would have never thought that would be like that kids would be knowing who that is. I feel like it's kind of like late teenagers, early 20s would kind of figure out who Greta is. That's awesome how she's got influence with the younger, really young generation starting to, because they see, I guess, a role model that they can look at, which is really cool. I mean, and then, working with law, and that's your qualification. Does that mean, and sometimes it doesn't, does that mean when you walk into a room and in a meeting, do you find that qualification helps, I guess, get respect from other people in the world that you're in?
I never think about this really, and it's interesting because I never present myself as a lawyer.
Mm,
I always present myself as the director of the NGO, but definitely education brings you respect, definitely, in every single way. And I think the law had teach me politics. The law had teach me to be independent. The law had teach me to see problems with a different approach. So I will say yes. My career and my education is one of the powerful tools that I got to get into the United Nations in so many different parts of the world. And that's why I definitely encourage that quality education is one of the biggest key elements to success and development.
for sure. And the NGO that you were mentioning before, is that Planting Change, the Planting Change Foundation?
Yes, Latin Change Foundation.
Can
Yeah.
you explain to us what that is and what you guys do?
The Planting Change Foundation is a US based NGO that trains the grassroots organizations in Latin America and to live a sustainable life and to improve the independence of local communities. So we work with projects in Nicaragua and Mexico at the moment. And what basically we're trying to do is to connect the knowledge of the US with the Latin American local projects into interchange experiences between those two worlds. And we just have 2 years by now, but I think we've been really successful. We have a really prominent team in Nicaragua. We have another team in Mexico, and as I mentioned you, I we probably be focusing in water for the next years.
Next years to come. Awesome. And now we're kind of hitting the tail end of today's discussion. Is there any bit of wisdom or knowledge or something that we didn't potentially touch on that you'd love to share with us?
Yes, organization and communications will be the two key elements to environmental protection success. If you're not organized, if you don't have a strong organization, the outcomes of your projects will not be good. If you don't have a strong communication, your project will fail. I will say that 80% of the success of a project depends on the communications that you give in. So in this new era, I think organization, communication, and definitely culture is going to be the main battlegrounds to defend the environment, especially culture. And culture is influenced by communication, by education, and by politics. I would say those are the three big, and of course, art of culture. And I think if you change, like if you go to in a country and you make a political change, that change could be regret. Like the U.S., they signed a Paris Agreement, but then Trump won and they withdraw of the Paris Agreement. So a political change is very flexible, but a cultural change is more powerful. And if you make a cultural change, it's like almost impossible for a politician to change that. So I think our work should be focusing and culture and culture we are competing with different people, the environmental people. We are competing with the churches, we are competing with the companies, and we are competing with the government for the general public consensus. So I think we need to be more smart in our communication strategies, and yes, that will be my
Your little bit of wisdom. That's awesome. No, that's That's incredibly powerful, and especially focusing on culture. You're right, because it is a long-term thing. And I mean, in the short term, political change is fine. That's exactly what we need. But in the long term, it's the cultural change that is going to make all the difference and all the significance. Look, if we wanted to find you, to connect with you, or learn more about any of the foundations or projects you're working with, where can we connect with you?
Okay, you could find us Planting Change Foundation in Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we have a website that is plantingchangefoundation.com, and our email is plantingchangefoundation.gmail.com.
Perfect. Look, Bernice, thank you so much for spending the time today and talking about all things that are important. I really loved what we touched on, and I think they're really important to kind of grasp with and tackle. And these conversations are the ones that, I love having. And I think that, the conversation doesn't stop here. It continues on when you're talking with your friends and your family, especially what we touched on before with the buying community sourced ingredients and organic ingredients, and from companies and organizations that don't support unethical trades. And that means it's not going to be as simple as going online and clicking the buy now button. It's going to mean doing a bit of research and understanding where, your food comes from, where your clothes come from, where you're getting all these things and sourcing all of them. So, and thank you so much for jumping on again. And I will definitely speak to you very soon.
Thank you so much, Tom. This has been a great opportunity. I've never been in Australia, so guess one of these days, maybe
Yes.
one of the climate attacks could be in Australia.
I'll see you then.
Thank you so much.
Hi there. Welcome to the end of the episode. Thank you for lending me your ears for the whole way through. I really hope you enjoyed our chat. Thank you once again to Bernice for having this conversation. I truly enjoyed it, and you are such a lovely soul. If you want to help support and connect with him, all the links, as always, are in the show notes. And of course, ours are too. Instagram, TikTok, all the good stuff is down below. I will see you all on next week's episode. Stay happy, eat plants, peace.